Okay, so you should be on 1.2, which is the multiplication and division of integers. Okay, so we're going to be going over, we just went over adding and subtracting of integers, whether they're both positive numbers, both negative numbers, or a negative and a positive. And we're going to be doing the exact same thing here, but with multiplication and division. So we know that our numbers can either be positive, negative, or zero, right? So now we're going to look at the positive and negative effects with multiplication and division and not worry about zero, because we know anything multiplied by zero or anything divided by zero is just zero, okay? So if we multiply a positive number by a positive number, we will get a positive number. So for instance, if I multiplied 5 times 5, two positive numbers, I get 25. Now, if I was to do a negative number times a negative number, negative 5 times negative 5, I would also get 25. So it is a positive number. However, if I was to multiply a positive number times a negative number, so 5 times negative 5, I would get negative 25. So I would get a negative number. And if I did the exact same thing but the opposite way around, I'd get negative times a positive number is always going to be a negative. So if we look at this again for our rules, same signs equal positive, different equal negative, okay? So that's what we've concluded with our rules for multiplication of integers. So if I have a positive 6 and a positive 2, I know my number is going to be positive, and 6 times 2 is equal to 12. If I have positive 5 times negative 4, well, I've got a positive number and a negative number, so I know it's going to be negative. And then 5 times 4 is 20. Same thing with the next question. I have a negative 2 and a positive 9, and I'm multiplying. If you have two brackets beside each other, guys, it means that it is multiplication. So brackets beside each other equals multiplication. All right, important to know. So negative 2 times positive 9 is going to be a negative number, and that's going to be negative 18. Our next example, we have a negative 3 times a negative 8. Well, we know two of the same signs will be a positive number, so it would be positive 24. And then we've got a couple numbers in a row, which make things a little more difficult. So we have a pot, and all we do, guys, is we do one at a time. So we do these two, and then once we get an answer with that, we'll do those two, okay? So positive 3 times negative 2, we know two different ones. It's going to be a negative. So it'd be negative 6 times positive 4. And in this case, we're still left with a negative and a positive. So it would be negative. And then it would then be 6 times 4 is 24. So our last one here makes things a little trickier, why I said do one at a time. Because if we do negative 4 times negative 3, we'd get positive 12. But then we got to multiply it by negative 10. And 12 times negative 10 is going to give us a negative number. And that number is going to be 120. All right. So we're going to move on to division now. All right. So division is, believe it or not, it's going to be the exact same rules that we just did, but for division. Okay. So we're dividing numbers now, but if we have a positive number divided by a positive number, so let's say 6 divided by 2, I'm going to get 3. So that is positive. If I have a negative and a negative number, both the same, negative 6 divided by negative 2, I'm going to also get positive 3. And if I then had a positive and a negative, or the opposite, if we think about that, 6 divided by 2, we're going to get negative 3. So it'll be a negative and a negative. So once again, same signs, opposite signs. Okay. So we have positive 72 divided by positive 9. So in this case, we would have two positive numbers. We know it's going to be positive, and it is 8. All right. Our next one is 28 divided by negative 4. So we have a positive and a negative. Therefore, we know it's going to be a negative. And 28 divided by 4 is 7. Finally, we've got it in the form of a fraction. So when we see it in a fraction, it's the same as division. All right. So in this case, negative 24 divided by 8 is a negative number divided by a positive number. And that number, so then would be negative, and it's negative 3. All right. And the last one, we then have two negative numbers. So we know if we have two negative numbers, it is going to be positive, and 45 divided by negative 45 divided by negative 5 is positive 9. All right. So